Loewe. In 1923, when radio was just becoming a mass technological marvel, a modest little company appeared in a small workshop in Europe, which was to live through a whole century and survive, with ups and downs, successes and failures, great achievements, major bankruptcies and a revival. We are talking about the German company Loewe. And here is a small, albeit strange, but important clarification. The German company Loewe, to which this video is dedicated, has no connection to the Spanish fashion house of the same name. It is simply a coincidence of names. The histories are completely different. Formally, the history of the Loewe brand dates back to the 2nd of January, 1923, when the Radiophon company was founded in Berlin. Among the founders were businessmen Erwin Buttermilch and engineers Gerhard Grüttner and David Ludwig Loewe. Very soon, the Loewe surname became the mainstay of the project. Brothers David and Sigmund Loewe consolidated control, and the company changed its name to Radio Frequenz GmbH. A group of enthusiasts quickly gathered around the promising young company and literally pushed through the idea of public radio broadcasting in Germany. Sigmund Loewe was not just an entrepreneur and engineer, he was a man of character, and with ambitions to make radio accessible not to the elite, but to ordinary families. Interestingly, the company had a stroke of luck right at the start of its journey. In the early 1920s, the then President of Germany, Friedrich Ebert, was shown the capabilities of radio technology for transmitting music and speech. The impression was so strong that the Postal Department soon gave the green light to create a structure for regular commercial radio broadcasting. And at that very moment, Loewe was among those who received a license to manufacture and sell radio receivers. Demand grew rapidly, the small workshop became a factory, and various divisions, tubes, speakers, resistors, began to be marketed under the single brand name Loewe Radio. Loewe's main early selling point was not its appearance or marketing, but an engineering trick that was essentially ahead of its time. In the mid-1920s, Sigmund Loewe created a multi-electrode tube, combining 3 triodes and even passive circuit elements, capacitors and resistors, in a single module. According to history, in the early stages of the company's development, the Loewe brothers were greatly assisted by a very young physicist, Manfred von Ardenne, who worked with them and helped turn their ideas into real technology. Regardless of how roles were distributed, the outcome was the same. At the time, the company's solutions appeared to be advanced proto-integrated circuits, that is, an attempt to pack more electronics into a single module, reduce the number of parts, and make devices cheaper and more compact. But innovation rarely walks the red carpet. A consortium of large companies that own patents associated with Robert von Lieben temporarily blocked the production of radio lamps with multiple electrodes. For Loewe, this resulted in serious financial difficulties. Sigmund initiated patent disputes, and by August 1926, the company regained the right to manufacture and sell its multi-electrode tubes in Germany. It was 1926 that made Loewe a household name in the radio era. That year saw the release of the legendary Loewe OE333 model. The idea behind the new product was clever and honest at the same time. Formally, the receiver appeared to use only 1 tube, but inside there were 3. This allowed the manufacturer to avoid high taxes on multi-tube devices and keep the price lower. The receiver was inexpensive, reliable and, for its time, produced very decent sound. Demand was so high that the factory worked in 3 shifts almost non-stop. One way or another, Loewe became one of the symbols of early radio in just a few years, a brand that not only sold devices but also truly advanced technological culture. By the end of the 1920s, the company had expanded significantly, built a large factory in Berlin, and employed over 1,000 people. In 1929, the structure was formalized as the Berliner Radio AG Joint Stock Company, which brought together subsidiaries and assets. Almost immediately, Loewe began to look beyond radio. The company's next dream was television. In 1929, Loewe became a co-founder of the Fernseher AG Consortium, an association of companies that were to push television technology into the future. This project led to collaboration with John Loewe, a pioneer of mechanical television. But it quickly became clear that mechanics had its limits in terms of quality. The future, of course, belonged to electronic television, where the image is formed by a cathode ray tube. And this is where the moment came that in the history of Loewe is referred to as "we were there when it all began." In August 1931, at the Berlin Radio Exhibition, the Loewe stand showed the world's first fully electronic television broadcast, without mechanical discs, only an electronic beam in a kinescope. The audience saw a moving image transmitted over distance. This presentation was covered by world-class newspapers, including the New York Times. For 1931, it was a glimpse of the future that suddenly arrived at the exhibition hall. After the successful exhibition, the company began to rapidly increase its patent activity in the field of television, and in 1933, the first commercial television set from Loewe was released, which, according to historical reference books, was simply called Televisor. Importantly, the model was equipped with a sound system that was quite decent for its time, an attempt to combine picture and high-quality sound. In other words, it was home audio-video long before the term home entertainment even existed. In 1936, during the Berlin Olympics, televisions became part of public television salons, and viewers watched live broadcasts of sporting events for the first time. By the end of the 1930s, Loewe was planning to start producing combined multimedia consoles, a television, radio, and gramophone in a single cabinet. It seemed that growth and prosperity were the only things ahead. But history broke both the company and people's destinies. Almost immediately after the new German government came to power in 1933, the Loewe brothers came under pressure because of their Jewish origins. They faced difficulties and personal tragedy. The brothers did not sell their business to the state, but the pressure was so high that the company was essentially nationalized in the late 1930s. The enterprise was subsequently renamed Opta, which worked on government contracts. The factories of the newly formed enterprise manufactured radio receivers, radio equipment, and military radar devices. Revenue and production volumes increased significantly, but it was a different economy, a military one, without freedom and without the previous meaning. By the end of the war, the former Loewe enterprises, like many other German companies, were in ruins. After 1945, the picture changed again. Germany was divided, assets were decentralized, some factories were dismantled and removed, and part of the Loewe company was nationalized in East Germany. Despite losing almost everything, the company managed to resume manufacturing radio receivers in 1946, initially using whatever had survived the war. In 1947, production began again in Kronach, Bavaria. This place would become the heart of Loewe for decades. The company owes the restoration of the family business to Sigmund Loewe, who returned to Germany after the war and in 1949 managed to register the revived brand as Loewe Opta AG. Fortunately, circumstances were on Sigmund's side. In 1952, regular television and radio broadcasting began in Germany, and Loewe was technically ready for this event. Thanks to the engineers' efforts, the company's turnover rapidly increased in the 1950s. This was the time when Loewe began full-scale production of televisions and was not limited in its experiments. The team began to create new devices for recording sound and images. About a year later, Optophone, a tape recorder with replaceable cassettes, appeared in the company's catalog. It was an early cassette idea, even before the era of compact cassettes. There is also mention of an automatic cassette reversal, a bold feature that was ahead of its time and therefore did not become a mass success. But at the very beginning of the 1960s, there was a loud announcement: Optocord 500, Europe's first video recorder. This device was relatively modest, reel-to-reel, with 50mm tape, more of a professional or experimental home device, but the fact remains, Loewe was trying to offer television recording when for most people it still seemed like science fiction. At the same time, Loewe took up photographic technology. In 1959, The development of the first electronic flash for cameras was mentioned, and by the mid-1960s, there was already a whole line of them. And all this time, Loewe Opta radio sets have been living in people's homes, wooden cabinets with tube radios and record players, whose warm sound evokes a special nostalgia among collectors today. Unfortunately, parallel to the rapid development in the early 1960s, Sigmund Loewe passed away. With the passing of the founder, the family era came to an end. In 1963, the family sold part of the business to Philips and other investors. It was then that a long period of external influence began. The structure of the company changed constantly, as did its name. By 1965, there were already several almost independent brands managed by Loewe Opta, headquartered in Berlin with branches in Kronach and Düsseldorf. The mid-1960s were difficult for the television industry. People were waiting for color, sales of black and white TVs were falling, and cheap equipment from Asia was putting pressure on the market. To survive, Loewe removed everything unnecessary and concentrated on television. In 1967, the company completely shut down its radio production and sold its radio factory in Düsseldorf. In the same year, color television was launched in Germany, and Loewe managed to showcase its own color TV models, cementing its reputation for high-quality, premium German technology. However, even before this period, the company had made a name for itself in the field of portable devices. In 1963, the company presented the Optaport portable television, a small suitcase with a 25 cm diagonal screen and a built-in radio, that is, a two-in-one device that still looks interesting even today. In the 1970s, Loewe gradually closed its historic Berlin factory and concentrated production in Kronach. At the end of the 1970s, the company's catalogue included a variety of devices, despite its desire to work mainly in the field of televisions. For example, Loewe produced record players during those years. It is worth noting that the company always tried to pay as much attention to sound as it did to image. Back in the late 1970s, Loewe introduced the first European television with stereo sound, which went into production in 1981. According to historical texts, the company tried to make the television not just a talking box, but a device with real immersive sound, almost like a home theater before the term itself appeared. In the 1980s, problems began with Philips. In 1985, antitrust authorities discovered that Philips, through affiliated structures, actually controlled much more than it officially declared. Philips was required to sell off its stake in Loewe. Despite the difficulties, this was a good opportunity for Loewe to regain its independence. A management buyout took place. A consortium of managers bought control of the brand, and various investment firms and even the renowned BMW acted as partners in the deal. Almost immediately, the brand bet on what would become its new identity: premium class, design, and the feel of boutique technology. After these events, the iconic Art line came onto the scene. The icing on the cake was the Loewe Art 1, the company's first television with fully digital signal processing. Many industry historians consider this model to be the world's first digital television with true hi-fi stereo sound by all standards. In addition, the model became a design icon that was even exhibited in museums. In short, Art 1 became a symbol of the new Loewe, technology that is simultaneously about engineering, sound and aesthetics. It was during this era that Loewe received a flood of design awards, formed its internal design management, collaborated with well-known studios and developed a recognizable style. The next stage was the conclusion of new deals with fresh technology applications. In 1991, the company's management sold part of its shares to the giant Matsushita, Panasonic, but in the second half of the decade, this stake was almost completely resold to another investment firm. In addition, a number of large and small investors joined in managing the brand on its own initiative. Despite the business turmoil, Loewe continued to do its job. A good example is the Sphero CS1, 1995, and Zellos Media, around 1997, televisions. Media was a television with internet access, a precursor to smart TV, when the very idea of the internet on a television seemed like science fiction. However, all early ideas about smart TVs proved to be nonsense when, in the 2000s, the industry abruptly switched from CRT to plasma and LCD. As it turned out, the company was not ready for the new race. The audience was not waiting for expensive premium products, but for technological breakthroughs. Loewe's sales fell and losses grew. The company was forced to launch a restructuring plan called Project Taurus. Employees made sacrifices, part of their salaries was set aside, then salaries were cut and a quarter of the staff was laid off. At the same time, Loewe accelerated the release of new models, switched production to flat screens, and moved part of the assembly and component development to China. However, the company assured that key engineering and quality remained true to the meaning of engineered in Germany. For many industry experts, all this was an undeniable crisis for the company. However, Loewe managed to slow down this crisis. The company found the strength to buy back some of its shares and, most importantly, agreed to cooperate with Japanese giant Sharp, which invested around €12 million in the development of the brand and acquired approximately 30% of the shares. This saved the company. New premium series appeared in the catalogue, including Individual, Connect, Art, and the top-of-the-line reference. In addition, the company launched TVs with internal memory for recording broadcasts, HD TV panels, models with advanced network functions and the ability to customize the appearance, as well as TVs with the option of configuring the acoustics to individual requirements. It is important to note that the company offered its audience not only a premium picture, but also its own advanced sound, a television as the center of a system with high-quality sound, complete with speakers and a subwoofer, or a system that was, in essence, the predecessor of modern soundbars with surround sound. Moreover, at that time, Loewe tried to prove that good sound and image should go hand in hand, and also look so that the technology was part of the interior, not a compromise. Nevertheless, the 2010s proved too tough for Loewe's premium line. Flat-panel smart TVs from 2011 and 2012 quickly fell in price, making the premium niche unprofitable. In July 2013, Loewe filed for protection from creditors, and in October 2013, it officially declared insolvency. However, in early 2014, a group of investors decided to save the brand. According to news sources, these were experienced managers from several companies, including Apple, Bang & Olufsen, and Stargate Capital. As a result, several powerful market players set out to rescue the legendary German brand. The firm signed agreements with major manufacturers, including the Chinese company Hisense and the Korean giant LG, which subsequently supplied Loewe with branded OLED panels. However, third-party investors and partners were unable to save the brand from further commercial problems. In 2019, the company halted production again and effectively went bankrupt for the second time, ceasing production and laying off almost all of its employees. At this point in Loewe's history, there could have been a bold final caption. But instead, there was another turn of events. In December 2019, Skytech Group acquired the rights to the Loewe brand and key assets. The company was then renamed Loewe Technology GmbH. At the historic location in Kronach, the new owners rented large premises, recruited staff and resumed service and spare part sales, showing the old audience that the brand had not disappeared and that production of the equipment had not been abandoned. The revamped Loewe also maintained its partnership with LG and Hisense, launching new product lines, audio systems, multi-room solutions, the Klang line, and the We by Loewe sub-brand, a more affordable entry point into the world of Loewe. In 2021, the company expanded into new markets, including the United Kingdom and subsequently the United States. And in this new chapter, products appeared that sound particularly symbolic to old Loewe fans, not only televisions, but also audio products, including headphones. For example, the Loewe Leo model. This is the story of Loewe when viewed as a whole. It is a brand that started with radio tubes and radio receivers, was one of the first to showcase electronic television, survived the war and the name change, recovered in chronic, experimented with sound and video recording, made the television a design object and status symbol, brought the internet to the screen, went through bankruptcy twice, and came back twice. And, most importantly, Loewe almost always tried to maintain a balance. Picture quality was important, but so was sound. From pre-war and post-war radios to stereo televisions, from television as cinema to modern OLED panels with signature sound and multi-room acoustics. Today, Loewe is no longer a market giant or a manufacturer of mass-market technology. It is more of a boutique brand that thrives on its heritage, design, engineering culture, and the very audience that remembers the days when technology lasted for decades. Loewe may have been repaired, rebuilt, relaunched, even shut down, but the brand kept coming back. And as long as there are people for whom the words hi-fi, design, and German engineering are not empty words, this story is clearly not over yet.